What's up, Facebook Fortnite group? Velo here, back again with another video, and today we are talking about building 101. That's right, this is the first video in our complete Fortnite building and editing guide. If you aren't already, make sure you click that subscribe button. It's absolutely free. Also, don't forget to turn on notifications so you know when our next video is released. If you want to chat with me live, check out my Twitch channel. I will leave a link to that in the description below. And with that out of the way, let's get right into it. First things first, we got to get your binds right. Your binds, or more specifically your building binds, are the buttons that you'll be using to select and build various structures in Fortnite. Now, when it comes to choosing the right building binds, there are just a few rules you need to know. Number one, whatever you choose, give it time. This is going to take a while for you guys to get used to these new buttons. Give it time. Number two, when choosing your binds, make sure it doesn't affect your movement. On PC, you don't want to be lifting your finger off of your forward movement, or most commonly your W key, to select a certain structure. Choose keys that are easy and comfortable to reach and don't require you to reposition your hand. If your mouse has additional buttons that you aren't using, consider one of those when picking the right binds for you. Here you can see what I use on PC, but this doesn't necessarily mean it's what's best for you. If you want to try my binds, feel free. I'd love to hear your feedback, but again, give it time. If you're playing on controller, there are a variety of button layouts to choose from, but probably the most popular button layout for building is Builder Pro, or some custom variation of it. This is because Builder Pro allows you to assign an individual button to each building structure. Here you can see my left and right trigger, as well as my left and right button, are assigned to each of the 4 building structures. Okay, I know you're ready to start building like a pro, but before you can build any structures in Fortnite, you're going to need materials, or mats for short. There are 3 different types of materials in Fortnite, and they are wood, brick, and metal. Each material type has its own unique characteristics. Wood, although the weakest of the 3 with only 150 HP, is the fastest to build, completing in approximately 4 seconds. Also, wood is usually the easiest material to gather with an abundance of trees in the game. Brick has a build completion time of approximately 11 seconds, reaching its maximum strength of 300 HP, where metal needs approximately 23 seconds to reach a max of 500 HP. For this reason, it's usually best to use brick or metal, commonly referred to as our hard mats, when building towers or boxes that you plan on staying in for a while. The additional strength will help defend against attack, and it can even deter people from attacking you to begin with. So you might be wondering, where do you find these materials? Well, there are a few different ways to harvest mats in Fortnite. You can find materials, usually in stacks of 30, in chests, on the floor in loot spawn locations, off of eliminated opponents, or in llamas. Llamas are harder to find since they are randomly scattered throughout the map in different locations, but they will give you 250 of each material. You can also harvest materials by breaking various objects with your pickaxe. You'll find that some objects give you more materials than others, but probably the most common sources include trees, pallets, wood fencing, and wooden furniture to gather wood, rocks and brick walls for brick, as well as cars, metal fencing, and metal objects for metal. Now, I know a lot of new players bypass gathering a surplus of materials, but get in the habit, because after watching this video series, before long, you're going to need those materials. So now that you have chosen your building binds and you know how to gather materials, let's look into the building mechanics, starting with the types of structures in Fortnite. There are 4 of them. You have the wall, great for defending against attack and reinforcing your builds. Stairs, or what I prefer to call ramps, are great for gaining height, to traverse over obstacles, or get a better vantage point over an opponent. Floors, which is what I'll call them regardless if they're above or below us, are commonly used to traverse over or across obstacles, to reinforce builds, or provide protection from above or below. Finally, the roof, which we're going to call cones moving forward, I know we keep changing the names, are used in a variety of ways, but most commonly to provide a second layer of protection from above or below when paired with the floor. You'll learn even more uses for the cone when we get into our editing videos coming soon. To build these structures, it's going to depend on which platform you're playing. PC players, you will select the structure you wish to build by pressing the button or key that you chose for that particular piece. Then you can place the structure by pressing your Place Building button, most likely your left mouse click button. Controller players, you will first press your Build Mode button, mine is B, Then select your structure you wish to build by pressing its corresponding button that you have bound. If you haven't done it already, a good option on controllers is to have build immediately turned on so you don't have to press a separate button to place your builds. You can find this option by going to your menu, clicking settings, then clicking the controller options icon, and under input, you will see build immediately. Now, where that structure goes is going to depend on a few things, but the two biggest contributing factors are positioning and crosshair placement, basically where you're aiming. Your positioning is going to be based on the location of your character in relation to where you are aiming your crosshair. Let's start with a wall. Start by standing in the middle of a square and aim straight ahead. Notice where our wall goes when we place it. From this point in the middle of our square, we can build walls on all four sides with about equal distance from our character on all sides. Also note that with the wall, placement is not really affected by aiming up or down. But now watch how that changes if we're on the edge of the square or the edge of two squares if you think about it. Now our wall placement is going to change based on our positioning and crosshair placement. If our crosshair is aimed at the far side of the square that we're standing on, the wall will be placed much further away than if we aim at one of the adjacent sides of that same square. Take it one step further, if we're standing on the corner of the square, which is actually the corner of four squares, you can see how our wall placement is going to be affected. I know what you're thinking, wait a minute Velo, there aren't squares all over the ground for us to position ourselves off of, and you're right. This is where spacing comes into play. By referencing the space between our character and another structure, or by looking at the structure we are wanting to place, we can get a better idea of where we are positioned in that proverbial square. That said, our other structures are going to respond a little differently based on our positioning and, like I said, crosshair placement. Let's take a look at the ramp. Now, notice if we stand in the middle of the square and aim straight ahead, like we did before, where that ramp will place. If we move our crosshair towards a corner square, note how the ramp responds based off the specific location of our crosshair. Interestingly, this response is not uniform on both sides. Since Fortnite is a third-person point of view game and our crosshair is located on the right side of our character, some actions are different depending on which side of our character they are being performed. Similarly, look at what happens if we move our crosshair down, aiming inside our square. Now notice how that ramp wants to place inside the square, but how the direction of the ramp changes based on where we aim in relation to our character's position. As we did with the wall, look at how placement options change when we position our character on the edge of two squares. By aiming our crosshair inside a connecting square, we can place our ramp in that square. Same goes for the four corners. If we stand on the corner of four squares, we again can place our ramp in any of the adjacent squares. Moving on to the floor and cone, these structures act very similar to ramps, placing in connecting squares based on your crosshair placement. But since these structures are symmetrical, it doesn't really make a difference if they rotate. And since we're on the subject, you can rotate any of your structures prior to placing them by pressing your rotate building button or key. Again, this really only has a notable effect on ramps. So now that you understand individual structure placement, let's take a look at how these structures interact with one another. Again, starting with walls, by placing a wall in front of our character, we now open a new placement option when we aim our crosshair above the built wall. Interestingly, you actually have to aim your crosshair above the location you wish to place that wall. I have no idea why. However, if you jump, you can place the same wall by aiming your crosshair in the desired location. Leaving the first wall where it is, take a look at what happens when we add a ramp. Notice that the wall blocks the ramp from being able to be placed inside the adjacent square. But if you aim up above the wall, you can place a ramp extending off of the top of the wall. You can still place your ramp in the connecting squares not being blocked by the wall, as you could before. The same is true for floors and cones. But with our floor piece, look at what happens when we look up above the wall now. The floor wants to place above us. If we lower our crosshair down on the wall, there comes a point where the floor will want to place below us. This is where the cone is unique. Look at what happens when we look above the wall with the cone. That cone wants to place on the opposite side connected to the top of the wall. If we bring our crosshair down just below the top of the wall, we can see the cone moves to the position once again above us. There are a number of advanced situations that extra reach we get with our cones can play in our favor, but this is building 101. I'll give you guys a little glimpse at what I mean, but don't put too much thought into this. Let's quickly go back to our ramp that is placed on the top of our wall. Notice from this position, if we select our cone and jump, it gives us the ability to connect our cone to the top of our ramp. Now let's try that with a floor piece. It doesn't work. Don't think on it too long, but you will see where this becomes important in some of our advanced building videos. Alright, getting back on track, let's take a look at the differences when we start with a ramp. If we try to place another ramp with our crosshair on the previously built ramp, notice how nothing happens. It won't allow us to build a ramp behind our first ramp. Lift our crosshair up above the ramp and you can see, as we could before with the wall, we can build another ramp connected to the top of our first ramp. If things weren't getting confusing enough, let's pull out our wall piece. Look what happens when we aim our crosshair at the ramp now. Our wall wants to place behind our ramp. Our ramp doesn't block the wall as the wall did before. If we look up, we can place a wall connected to the top of our ramp, but this one is interesting. Where before we had a clear divide, like placing a ramp above our wall, all we had to do was aim our crosshair above the wall. But when trying to build a wall at the top of our ramp, that dividing line moves depending on where we are positioned on the ramp. Notice when we are lower on the ramp, we have to aim much higher to place our wall. When we are standing in the middle of the ramp, we can place the wall by aiming a little lower, and when we are standing at the top of the ramp, even lower. Things get even spicier when we pull out our floors and cones. Select our floor piece, aim at the ramp, and the floor is going to place either below or above the ramp based on where we are aiming and also where your character is positioned. The cone, however, cannot be placed under a ramp, only above. But consistent with our cone's behavior, look at what happens when we aim our crosshair above our ramp. Now we can build our cone connected to the far side of the ramp. Remember how we said cones can't be placed under ramps? Well, it's also worth mentioning that a ramp cannot be placed on top of a cone either. They occupy the same build position and therefore you have a unique interaction. This becomes important later on when we get into advanced building techniques that involve blocking an opponent. The last setting we're going to check is turbo building. I believe this is on by default, or at least it should be, but let's just double check that we all have turbo building enabled. Once again, open your menu, click on settings, and then choose the gear icon to open up the game settings. Scroll down to the building section and you will find turbo building. Make sure that is turned on. What turbo build does, it allows us to continue building whatever structure we currently have selected without letting go of our build key or button. When holding down our build bind, that structure will continue to place when there is a location available based on, once again, our character's position and crosshair placement. Notice when we hold down our ramp build, our ramps build everywhere we look. Without turbo building turned on, we would have to individually press and release our build key on every single build, and we don't want that. All right, time for you guys to go practice. I suggest going into a creative map and just working on switching between your different build binds until you become familiar with your bind layout. A good drill to do is choosing two structures. In this example, we'll use ramps and floors. Start by building 5 ramps. Then press your floor bind and build 5 floors. Continue this process until you can seamlessly transition between ramps and floors without making a mistake. I like to think that if you can do it successfully 5 times, then you have a pretty good grip on it. Once you have that, instead of building each structure 5 times, you're going to build them 4 times. This reduces the amount of time between when you have to switch builds. Do this until you can complete it successfully 5 times, and then cut it down to 3 or 2, and then eventually you'll be building 1 ramp and 1 floor, then 1 ramp, then 1 floor, and at that time I think you have a pretty good grasp over those 2 keys or buttons. After that, I would suggest trying other structures like cones and floors or cones and ramps. We'll have more videos, guys, coming out soon to go over specific build patterns, drills, and other strategies that you guys will get to follow along with and improve your building skills. So with that said, thank you guys so much for watching. If you found this video helpful, please don't forget to click that like button. It really helps out the channel. And if you haven't already, again, like I said in the beginning, click that subscribe button so you can stay tuned and when our new videos become available. As always, guys, thank you so much for watching. Have a great day, and I will see you in the next video.